I would like to thank my peers for their valuable and insightful speeches today. It is an honor to stand here and share the work we carried out as summer interns at Journalists and Writers Foundation. Together, we built this policy paper, and today Elif and I have the privilege to present it here. Over the course of a month, we immersed ourselves in articles, data, and reports, conducted interviews with experts, and spoke directly with youth on the street level. Our goal was not only to analyze but to bridge the gap between theory and lived reality. Globally, young people between the ages 10 to 24 now number 1.8 billion, the largest youth population in history. Yet, paradoxically, our access to decision-making remains minimal. While we make up nearly a quarter of the global population, only 2.6% of parliamentarians worldwide are under the age 30. This imbalance is not only statistical, it is structural, and it represents injustice. Our work set out to show that youth cannot remain passive recipients of policy. We must move from symbolic inclusion to meaningful participation. We identified 4 interconnected challenges. Participation gaps. Despite being the largest demographic, youth turnout in elections and consultations remain low, and fewer than 1% of youth delegates are under 30. As Ms. Rana from Civicus reminded us, youth demands are rarely heard by actual decision makers. For trust to rebuild, our voices must reach member states directly, not just circulate the tokenistic forums. Representation gaps. Even when youth are present, they are often relegated to advisory or symbolic positions without real power. This creates disencouragement and signals to young electorates that leadership is out of reach. Limited resources and opportunities. Rana emphasized that unpaid internships and visa restrictions make participation a privilege of the few. Who gets to contribute is too often determined by socioeconomic backgrounds, not ideas. She argued that youth work must be compensated, otherwise inclusivity is meaningless. And finally, trust deficit. Young people describe these spaces as unsupported, non-inclusive, and tokenistic. Many feel pressure to follow preset agendas, and most critically, contributions disappear without follow-up. As Ms. Al-Hawan from Media Nations put it, we must back our words with actions. Her activism after the Beirut explosion proved that even small steps can rebuild trust when they are visible and consistent. From these challenges, 3 principles emerge. Transparency and accountability. Transparency is more than publishing reports. It is opening decision-making so that young people can see how problems are debated, solutions reached, and actions implemented. Ms. Al-Hawan's supply chain initiative in Beirut showed how transparency builds trust at the most fragile moments. A young person we interviewed echoed this. Transparency is the #1 factor in restoring faith. Inclusiveness and representation. Inclusion means dismantling barriers, visa restrictions, financial burdens, and geography-based exclusions. Mrs. Rana emphasized that true inclusivity cannot rely on unpaid or inaccessible opportunities. Representation also requires reforms. Mr. Wasif from Bachelorite called for youth and assemblies as transformative spaces to both strengthen democracy and prepare tomorrow's leaders. He also noted that institutions must adapt to how young people actually communicate, delivering information in formats youth respond to. And finally, intergenerational co-leadership. True leadership prepares others to lead. Mr. Wasif reminded us that transitions cannot happen overnight. Knowledge must flow gradually, with mentorship and shared responsibilities. Co-leadership benefits both sides. Young gain experience and elders gain fresh insights. Mr. Mustafa from AFS added that this must be institutionalized, with dedicated departments and youth steering committees, ensuring youth perspectives are structurally embedded in governance. And now, standing here with my colleague Elif to present our policy brief at this roundtable, I see this as a culmination of those values and a reflection of how Journalists and Writers Foundation itself embodies the very best practice. And before I conclude, let me say this. Our generation has the potential not just to participate, but to be what I like to call the change makers and chain breakers. What we have shared so far is only the foundation of our policy brief. In the next part, my colleague Elif will tell us deeper into best practices and progress toward meaningful youth participation.
Thank you for that, Zeynep. I want to build on that by highlighting how these commitments are turning into progress. When I first began my research, I was struck by how strong the UN's youth framework looked on paper. The Youth 2030 strategy and the Youth Peace and Security Agenda mark a real shift in how international institutions think about young people. They make it clear youth are not only beneficiaries but partners in shaping solutions. That in itself is worth acknowledging. It reflects years of advocacy, coalition building, and determination from young people around the world. And progress is visible. Over the past decade, young people's involvement in UN processes has grown steadily. More UN entities have formal youth policies and programs, creating structured pathways for collaboration with youth-led organizations. Member states have also increasingly opened spaces for youth participation. The number of youth delegates at the UNGA has risen from fewer than 40 per year in 2008 to over 70 by 2017 and 2018, a decade later. These developments signal that youth are increasingly recognized not just as recipients of policy, but as active partners in advancing sustainable development, peace, and human rights. Civil society has also been instrumental in driving this momentum. A clear example here is JWF, which not only creates opportunities for youth engagement, but also demonstrates this commitment in practice, as reflected in the fact that all this round's speakers are young people. At the same time, however, we must be honest about where we stand today. For every good practice we can point to, there are persistent gaps that keep young people at the margins of decision-making. Fragmentation, tokenism, and inconsistent resources remain key challenges. Youth are often invited to have a voice, yet without mechanisms to ensure their contributions shape outcomes. Participation risks being symbolic rather than structural. And when young people consistently feel that their engagement does not translate into action, trust begins to erode. None of these are criticisms for the sake of criticism. They are observations of dynamics that exist today, dynamics we can collectively address. The real question is, how do we turn promising commitments into lived realities? Our research and analysis suggests clear pathways forward. Over the next decade, rebuilding youth trust and consolidating meaningful engagement must move beyond consultation towards system-wide transformation. The priority is to elevate young professionals from the margins to position of decision-making authority. This requires a combination of foundational changes, structural reforms, and practical engagement strategies. So 1. Binding mechanisms for participation. Youth advisory councils with authority, youth seats and delegations and mandatory quotas, capacity building and training, civil literacy, negotiation and policy analysis programs, plus pre-event training so youth can contribute as equal partners now, not later. 3. Inclusive digital engagement platforms, secure accessible tools to reduce barriers and modernize participation, sustainable funding and reforms, predictable multi-layer financing for youth-led organizations, mainstreaming youth perspectives, and standardized accountability mechanisms. And finally, scaling successful models, peer learning hubs, private sector partnership, participatory budgeting, and youth-centered agenda design. The risks are real, including tokenism and elite capture. Independent oversight, grievance mechanisms, and transparent reporting are essential protections. Flexible funding and genuine seats at the table are non-negotiable for trust. The biggest takeaway is this: mandates and frameworks matter, but they only matter if they are lived. Today, we see youth delegates at the UNGA, advocates shaping debates at the CSW, regional networks mobilizing on the ground, and civil society initiatives bridging global and local realities. These are encouraging signs, but unless these practices are scaled, consolidated and institutionalized, the gap between promise and delivery will remain. Closing that gap is not just a bureaucratic exercise, it's about credibility, justice, and future of multilateralism itself. If institutions fail to deliver for young people, they fail to deliver for the future. So if I had to sum it up in one line, it would be this: youth don't need symbolic inclusion, we need structural change. And that begins not just with sharing the space, but sharing the power. Thank you so much. Firstly, we weren't expecting this many questions, so we're not that prepared. I will try to answer it to the best of my ability. So for the scaling question, while we were interviewing, one of the people that we interviewed, Ali Mustafa, he's the founder of the International Youth Conference. He suggested that youth need a space in the UN. They need a specialized agency such as UN Women or UNICEF. So that is the kind of structural model we mean. It would bring together existing initiatives and give them an institutional home and scale youth participation to the system-wide level. So that's the first question. And for the second question, I don't see the lady that asked the question. I will still answer it. She asked about reform versus restructuring. So should we try changing the system or reform completely? That kind of pulled me into a dilemma because I don't have a straight up answer to that. I would say, on one hand, there's existing multilateral system that is often described as broken, but as seen with the examples that we gave, there are examples that shows us that this system does work. Maybe it works slowly, maybe it's not fast enough, but it does work. So what our paper suggests is we need to rebuild the system from within. It's about system-wide transformation from within, as I say. So I say rather than abandoning the system, maybe we should restructure it from inside out.